You are listening to episode 7 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about moments of untainted joy. I'm your host and shame coach, Danita Bremer. In this podcast, I tell stories from my life to fulfill a prompting I've had for far too long. I help you tell your story in a way you see you aren't alone. I want you to stop believing the lie that you aren't good enough so you can live a life of freedom and fulfillment the way God intended. Hey, welcome back, stars. I've been really following my intuition with this podcast, which episodes to air in which order. Actually, to be honest, I don't think that much about it. I just think about when have I felt shame in my life? How did I get through that? Knowing now what I know, like what did I learn from it? But I've just been kind of going off of like, what do I feel like talking about? What do I think would help you all? And the last few episodes have been kind of heavy. So I thought it would be fun to toss in an episode here that is a little bit lighter. And also, I've been doing some reflection work on what I really enjoy, what's fun for me, what lights me up. So today we're going to talk about untainted joy. Little side note, my husband says that I need to put a little more pep in my podcast. So I think partially because we're talking about joy today, moments of joy, and partially because of that feedback, I hope this sounds better, dear husband. Okay. Um, oh, and also just another little side note, if you've listened to a couple of episodes and you've enjoyed them or you found them helpful, sometimes I think enjoy is not the right word, but if you found them helpful, would you mind doing me a favor and rating or reviewing, or just share them with a friend? While it feels vulnerable to put this out into the world, I do believe God has a bigger purpose. And I also believe that telling our stories can be so powerful. So I don't necessarily know or understand God's plan, and I don't exactly know who needs to hear it. But if you share or rate or review, then that will help the people that need to hear it to find it. So thank you so much for that. Okay. So, untainted joy. I say untainted because I know there have been so many moments of joy throughout my life. Like it has not been void of joy. But when I look across my 40 years of life and a few less than that, that I can actually remember, it's hard to remember lots of true joy. And I think it's because many of those joyful moments were often overshadowed by other emotions like fear or sadness or anxiety. And just a little teaching tangent. This episode is going to be full of tangents, isn't it? Our survival brain, the part of your brain that keeps you alive, is actually only interested in three things, which is why this makes sense. This is called the motivational triad. So, the part of our brain that's in charge of keeping us alive wants to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and do it in the most energy efficient, ease filled way. So, if you think about caveman days, their whole job 24/7 was to stay alive. So, they had to get food and water and shelter, and they had to avoid predators. And they had to get the food and avoid the predators in the way that would use the least amount of energy so that they would need less food, right? So that part of our brain has come with us across time. So there's still a piece of your brain that just is totally concerned with keeping you alive. It is not concerned with keeping you happy. So it kind of makes sense that if we're looking back over time and we have a lot of pain or hurt, that the moments where we felt a lot of joy don't stand out because those ones aren't so important to our survival as far as staying alive, right? It's nice to be happy, but it doesn't keep you alive necessarily. Okay, so And the other thing I wanted to say is that I think everyone's brain, of course, is wired a little bit differently. But if you think about that motivational triad, I always think of it as like a triangle, and each of the corners has one job: avoid pain, seek pleasure, seek ease. My brain likes to hang out in the avoid pain and make it easy part of the triangle, somewhere in that realm. It doesn't really care about the pleasure part. And you can ask my family. They always tell me that I'm a stick in the mud. Mom, you're never fun. Like, you never want to do fun things. And my brain is very much geared toward, what do we have to get done? What's the easiest, most efficient way to do it? And like playing board games or going to amusement parks, not part of the plan in my brain. So your brain might be a little bit different. It might really like to hang out in the seek pleasure part of the motivational triad. So my point here is just that if I think about the part of my brain that's keeping me alive, it's doing a fabulous job. It also means that I don't have a lot of really crystal clear moments of joy. So totally okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 10 moments of untainted joy. So these are moments where I felt joyful in the moment and it wasn't tainted by fear or anxiety or anything like that. And all of these are kind of really quick stories. Like, they wouldn't be a whole podcast in and of themselves. So, and then at the end, I want to talk about what I notice, what I learned from doing this exercise, which is actually really fascinating to me. So, the first little story, and I'm roughly going in age order here, but the first story happened before I moved to Washington State. So, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I was at a park with my sister and some cousins. And my parents had this van. It was a old Chevy van, like early 70s model. So think of just like a box on wheels, and it was banana yellow. And I think we were at the park and it started to rain. And so we all ran into the van to get out of the rain. And I remember I was with my cousin Yolanda. She's a few years older than me. And I remember thinking that she was like so grown up because she couldn't stand up straight in the van without tilting her head to the side. So I could totally stand up straight and she couldn't. She had to tilt her head to the side. And I remember that we were singing the "It's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring" song. And it was just this really crystal clear memory of kind of looking at Yolanda, singing that song, just having fun being a kid. So that's moment number 1. Moment number 2 happened a few years later. We were living in Washington at this point, and I think it was like the height of summer because in this memory, we had built this little room off of our trailer that we lived in, and that's where our wood stove was. So it's was kind of the heat source. And it was also kind of like a little bit of a storage area. And it's where we like took our shoes off before we went into the house. And the side of it, it was just made of plywood, I think. Like, it wasn't, I don't remember for sure, but I don't think it was very well insulated. So I think it was just like plywood. And the side of this little room in the summertime got really hot. And I remember this one day where I noticed that there were hundreds of grasshoppers on the side of this outside wall because the sun was beating down on it and they were seeking this warmth. And I think I got a jar and I started just catching grasshoppers. And I think I was by myself. I don't remember my sister being there with me or my parents. I was just trying to catch as many grasshoppers as I could. And I don't know, I just remember feeling the warm sun and it was summer and I love nature and like looking at the little grasshoppers and just having fun with that. In fourth grade, I believe, there was a moment where it was springtime. It was kind of like one of the earliest days where it's a warm day, you don't need your jacket, but it's still a little bit breezy. And I remember being on the playground at my school and just kind of being by myself, walking along the fence line of the playground. And there were, a few dead leaves from the previous fall. And I don't know, just the slight warm breeze. And I just felt like so good in my heart. I was just like happy. And it was just this moment of happy. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4 is I remember so we spent a lot of time camping as when I was a kid and hiking or like doing day trips to um like a little stream area or a lake area. There were several that we would go to. But I remember this one day where I think we drove 45 minutes or an hour out of town and we park and we go down to where there's this stream and it's just this very wooded area. And really, what I remember the most about that is the smell, the kind of earthy, damp, wooded smell. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but that smell is like summertime and freedom because we would just set up and we would go fishing or the kids would just go explore and we were just allowed to just go wherever, right? And so that is another memory. And I think there is a moment, but it also is kind of like it applies to so many of those trips that we took, that earthy smell with the sound of water and sort of the dappled shade going on and it's warm. So there's memory number 4. Okay, number 5 happens at the lake, and I'm swimming by myself with goggles on, and the bottom of the lake is rocky. And I just remember that like feeling of when you're swimming and you're floating, and the water, it's just warm. And I don't know, like, again, it's sort of like this feeling of like freedom and fun mixed together. And so a lot of these moments happen near water, which doesn't surprise me at all because I'm pretty sure studies show that water is one of the elements of joy in most cases. So there are just kind of moments like that where I'm swimming and I'm just like, I just feel really happy. Okay. When I was a little bit older, probably around the age of 10 to 12 years old, my dad had given me this big camera. Now, this is not like, not a digital camera. This is back when there was film, but we didn't have film and I didn't have money to buy film. And my parents were like, well, you don't really know what you're doing with this camera. So we're not going to buy you any film. But I would take the camera and I would pretend that there was film in it and I would zoom in on the wood pile where the squirrels would run back and forth. And sometimes they would, of course, stop and sit like squirrels do. And I would zoom really closely in on them and imagine that I was taking pictures of the squirrels. And a little after that, so that's kind of where my love of photography started. But a few years later than that, even, I did have a camera. I don't remember if I borrowed it from my mom or I don't think it was mine because I think I bought my first camera in college. But I remember taking kind of a solo hike on our property, and it was during sunset time. And I took a bunch of pictures of the sunset. And I remember just sitting there on a rock, just in awe with how beautiful I felt the sunset was. And it had to have been summer because it was still warm and I just enjoying, just soaking up that moment of like, oh my gosh, the earth is so beautiful. I also have a moment around that same time, around age 11, 12, where it was just me and my mom in the house. I don't know where everyone else was. And I was like joking around with her and she was just cracking up laughing, just laughing, laughing, laughing. To be honest, she might have been high, but also I was cracking jokes and just being silly, and she was just laughing. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. I love it when my mom laughs. Okay, so that's moment number 7. Number 8 is a moment I had in the summertime because it was dark and it was nighttime and we were outside, my dad and I. And we were just sitting on the ground looking up at the stars, and he was explaining to me what the Milky Way was. And if you've grown up in a small town far away from the city lights, you know that one of the best benefits of growing up in a small town in a rural area is being able to see the stars. Oh my gosh. If you've never done that, I want you to go out camping somewhere, like you can go to the Grand Canyon, somewhere where there isn't a lot of light pollution, and stay up all night looking at the stars because it is a magnificent experience. And now that I live in a suburb, it's something I miss a lot. Okay, moment number 9, I just called it Hawaii. So, my husband and I went on our honeymoon to Oahu, and then 5 years later we had an opportunity to visit Maui. And then 5 years later, for our 10-year anniversary, we went back to Oahu. We made a day trip to the Big Island. And then just a couple years ago, we took our kids to Kauai. So I've been to Hawaii 4 times. I love it there. It is heaven on earth to me. It's warm and moist and the sound of the ocean. And I have this one moment that I believe is from my honeymoon. Oh, wait, no. I think it's actually from our 10-year anniversary, where I am sitting in the sand, laying in the sand. I think we had like dug out these little like seats for ourselves. So I wasn't like laying down flat, but sort of reclined in this little sand seat. And I was watching my husband out in the water surfing. And it was just the perfect temperature, the sun beating down on us, the sound of the ocean. Like that is like happiness contained for me, untainted joy. And then moment 10 is really anytime I'm in my husband's arms. I don't have a specific moment. I have several that flash through my mind, but just like when we're snuggling together and he has his arms around me and I just feel so safe and loved. Total untainted joy, no matter what is going on in the rest of our lives. Okay, so there's the 10 moments in the van when it's raining, catching grasshoppers, on the playground in the springtime, a day trip to the campground, that earthy smell, swimming, sunset photography, making mom laugh, watching the Milky Way with dad, being in Hawaii, and in my husband's arms. Okay. So, this is what I notice. And I think this is such a fabulous exercise for you to just reflect on your life and think about, when did I feel the most joy? Just like, just, just even a small moment of unfleeting joy. For myself, I notice that most of these, the majority of these happen when I'm by myself. And all of them, almost all of them, have an element of warmth. Either it's summertime or late spring, or like it's just warm, right? The sun is a big factor in a lot of these. Sunset or swimming, which probably, means that it's summertime. Um, yeah, so most of them happen when by myself, and the by myself I think was 6 out of 10. So, slightly more than half, but that's what immediately popped up for me. I was like, "Oh, No wonder. I love spending time by myself and I love the warmth and I really dislike the cold because it, I'm guessing my mind associates joy with warm and being by myself, right? Now, it's not that I can't feel joy with other people. My husband and my mom and my dad are in these moments. I did think it was kind of interesting that none of these moments included my kids. Now, I've had so many moments of joy with my kids, but I also think there's this element of like, you're the mom. And so you have to like keep them safe and what's next, what's for lunch, or, those kinds of things. So this is why it's like untainted joy. But I definitely have had some moments of untainted joy. I also think that my mind is, excuse me, my mind is a little bit focused on the past, like before kids, just right now. So that might be why as well. Okay. So I believe you can turn any moment into one of these poignant moments of joy. And it's kind of like a mindfulness meditation. If you can slow down enough to really notice all of the details. What do you see? What do you hear? What does it smell like? Is there anything to taste? Like some people might really associate certain meals or drinks or things like that with joy. How do you feel within yourself? And then how long can you hold on to that positive feeling? So the other day, I was having a great day and I just kept feeling so light and excited and like this in my solar plexus, that point right below your rib cage. I just kept feeling this sort of like flutter, like this like excitement or this anticipation and it was a normal day. There wasn't anything particularly special going on, but I've been practicing when I notice that kind of feeling, that really positive, joyful moment, holding on to it as long as possible, like keeping it in your body as long as possible. And I think this is how we turn any moment of joy into a memorable, poignant moment that in 10 or 20 or 50 years, we can look back and remember. I think it would be a super fun exercise to do this every day. Like find a moment of joy in your life every single day. Notice all the details. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you taste? And then hold on to that. The other thing you could ask is, what does this feel like in my body? And hold on to that feeling as long as you can. Like just be there with that feeling as long as you can. And I think that the more we exercise this skill and really slow down and notice these things, the more joyful we will be. Even if our lives have pain and heartache and grief and, guilt and all the things, even if our lives are filled with lots of negative emotion, doing this practice can help us to be joyful anyway. I think we can hold both at the same time. I would love for you to try this. And if you do, come and tell me about your experience by DM. Blah, 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 blah. I would love for you to try this. And if you do, come and tell me about your experience by DMing me on Instagram. That's my favorite place, although I am on Facebook as well. I would love to encourage you to do this, to look back on your life and find moments of untainted joy and push yourself to find at least 10 of them and then notice what they have in common, right? For me, it was this element of warmth and being by myself. And I can certainly set myself up for success with those, right? Okay, that's enough for now. And so are you. Go be yourself and follow the spirit and experience some untainted joy. If my story resonates with you, I would love to connect. Come find me at Danita Bremer Coaching on Instagram or Facebook. And if you would like help being yourself or following the spirit or finding moments of untainted joy, go to my website and sign up for a free consultation call. We can chat about how life coaching might be able to help you the way it has helped me. Oh, and by the way, music for this podcast was written and performed by my daughter, Maya.